The exhibition hall stretched 3 kilometers beneath the crystalline dome of Arcturus Station, where 73 civilizations had gathered to showcase their greatest achievements. Master Craftsman Vorath stood before his display with a kind of pride that came from 6 centuries of perfecting his art. His forearms gestured gracefully as he explained the molecular precision of Krell combat blades to a cluster of admirers. Each weapon takes 4 solar cycles to complete, he said, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. The alloy is folded at the quantum level, creating an edge so sharp it can slice through starship hull plating. The crowd murmured appreciation. A Zenthari diplomat recorded the moment on neural implants. 2 Ashan merchants whispered calculations about potential trade agreements. Then she walked up. Lieutenant Maya Chen, human, wearing a dress uniform that had seen better days and carrying a worn leather bag that looked like it had survived a war. Which, technically, it had. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her brown eyes held the kind of exhaustion that comes from traveling 2 weeks through jump gates to reach the station. Impressive, she said, leaning close to examine one of Vorath's masterpieces. How much does something like this cost? Vorath's chromatic scales shifted to amused orange. For a blade of this quality? Approximately 15,000 galactic credits. Though I rarely sell to private collectors. Most of my work goes to planetary defense forces and elite guard units. Maya nodded slowly, pulling her datapad from her pocket. She scrolled through something, lips pressed together. 15,000. Right. That's, what, about 30,000 Earth dollars? She glanced up at him. Can I ask you something? What's the Rockwell hardness rating on that blade? The question caught him off guard. Most species measured blade quality in entirely different terms. The approximate equivalent would be 68 on your human scale. Why do you ask? Just curious. She set down her bag with a heavy thunk that made several nearby attendees jump. You mind if I show you something? Before Vorath could respond, Maya was unwrapping an oil-stained cloth from whatever she'd brought. The fabric fell away to reveal a knife. No, not a knife. A work of art trapped in functional form. The blade was approximately 20 centimeters long, and its surface rippled with patterns that looked like water frozen mid-flow. Dark waves alternated with bright bands in a hypnotic dance that seemed to shift as the light hit it from different angles. The handle was simple wood, worn smooth by years of use, wrapped in leather that had molded to someone's grip over countless hours. Vorath's chromatic display flashed through confused purple and shocked white. What is that? Damascus steel, Maya said simply. My uncle makes them on weekends. This one's about 40 years old. He gave it to my dad when I was born. Dad carried it through the first contact wars. I've had it since he died at New Geneva. She said it matter-of-factly, but Vorath noticed the micro-expression that flickered across her face. Humans were relatively new to the galactic scene. Their admission to the Council had only happened 15 years ago, after they'd proven themselves in the conflicts against the Vraxian swarms. And New Geneva, well, everyone knew about New Geneva. The colony world where 3,000 humans had held the line against an entire Vraxian invasion fleet long enough for the evacuation to complete. There had been no survivors among the defenders. I am sorry for your loss, Vorath said, because even across species, some things transcended cultural boundaries. But I do not understand. Damascus steel is a primitive technique. Your species abandoned it centuries ago when you discovered better metallurgy. We did, Maya agreed. She picked up the knife, testing its weight with the casual familiarity of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Industrial production, modern alloys, all that good stuff. Way more efficient. But my uncle, he's kind of a history nerd. Spent 20 years researching the original techniques, the ones that got lost to time. Pattern welding, folding the steel, all of it. She offered the blade handle first to Vorath. Go ahead. Take a look. Vorath accepted it with 2 of his hands, bringing it close to his primary visual sensors. The patterns in the steel seemed impossibly complex, organic almost. He'd worked with metals for 600 years, and he'd never seen anything quite like this. The balance was perfect. The edge caught the light in a way that suggested sharpness beyond what simple measurements could capture. How many folds? He asked. Uncle Jake does 15 rounds, Maya said. That's about 32,000 layers, give or take. Takes him about 40 hours of actual forge work, spread over 2 or 3 weekends. Then there's the heat treatment, the acid etching to bring out the pattern, sharpening, finishing. She shrugged. He charges about $300 for something like this. Mostly he just makes them as gifts. The number hit Vorath like a plasma bolt. 300 of your dollars? But that is barely. 6 galactic credits, Maya finished. Yeah. I know. She took the knife back, running her thumb along the blade's spine with obvious affection. The really funny thing? Uncle Jake's not even that good. There are guys on Earth who've been doing this their whole lives. Masters who can create patterns so complex they look like wood grain or tiger stripes, or whatever the customer wants. They charge more obviously, but still. She looked up at Vorath's display of quantum-forged blades with their perfect uniformity and calculated precision. How long did you say your blades take to make? 4 solar cycles, Vorath repeated, his voice weaker now. Right. That's about 4 Earth years. Maya wrapped the knife back in its cloth with reverent care. Uncle Jake made 17 Damascus knives last year, while working a full-time job as an accountant. The crowd that had gathered around Vorath's display was now focused entirely on the conversation. The Xian metallurgist pushed forward, gesturing urgently. Impossible. No organic species can achieve that level of molecular bonding through primitive heating and hammering. The precision required, the timing, it would demand computational assistance. Maya smiled. It wasn't a friendly expression. Would you like me to show you videos? Uncle Jake streams his forge sessions sometimes. Gets about 200 regular viewers. They like watching him work and listening to him complain about tax season. She pulled up her datapad, navigating to a saved file. The holographic display showed an older human man, silver-haired and heavily muscled, working at a glowing forge. He pulled a bar of steel from the flames, laid it on an anvil, and began hammering with a rhythm that seemed almost meditative. Sparks flew with each strike. Sweat poured down his face. And slowly, incrementally, the metal began to fold and compress and transform. No computers. No quantum manipulation. Just heat, hammer, and human stubbornness. Your species does this for recreation? Someone asked from the back of the crowd. Some of us, Maya said. Blacksmithing had a huge revival about 50 years back. Started as a historical preservation thing, then people realized it was great stress relief. There are probably 10,000 amateur bladesmiths on Earth alone. More if you count the colonies. She looked at Vorath directly. Master Craftsman, I'm not trying to diminish what you've accomplished. Your work is beautiful, and I'm sure the quantum folding process is incredibly sophisticated. But when you called your blades impossible, when you said it took you 4 years to make something of this quality. She patted her bag where the Damascus knife rested. My uncle would probably just laugh and ask if you wanted to come over next Saturday. He's planning to make a chef's knife. Brings beer though. He gets cranky if people show up empty-handed. Vorath felt something crack inside his chest cavity. Not physical damage, but the shattering of a certainty he'd carried for 6 centuries. He was a master. His work had been displayed in 70 star systems. Planetary leaders commissioned his blades as symbols of power and prestige. And this human was telling him that her uncle, an accountant who worked in his garage on weekends, could produce comparable quality for a fraction of the cost and time. I do not believe you, he said, but his chromatic display had faded to uncertain gray. Maya's expression softened slightly. I get it. Really, I do. You've dedicated your life to this craft. The last thing you want to hear is that someone's hobby produces similar results. She hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. Look, I'm actually here on official business. The Human Defense Coalition is setting up trade negotiations with the Arcturus Commercial Alliance. Part of my job is cultural exchange, technology demonstration, that sort of thing. She gestured around the exhibition hall. All these displays, they're meant to show off what each civilization can do, right? Your impossible blades, the Zenthary gravity manipulation, ocean neural architecture. Everyone putting their best foot forward. Her smile turned sharp. What if I told you that humans consider ourselves pretty good at making things? Your industrial capacity is well documented, Vorath said carefully. The speed with which you construct spacecraft and orbital facilities is, admittedly, impressive. Not just speed, Maya said. Creativity. Adaptability. We're really good at figuring out how to do complex things with simple tools. She pulled out her datapad again, opening a new file. Before I showed up here, I did some research on galactic manufacturing standards. Turns out there are about 40 different categories where the Council claims to have reached the absolute peak of possible achievement. She scrolled through her notes. Quantum computing architecture. Plasma containment field generation. Genetic modification precision. And blade crafting, apparently. Her eyes met Vorath's. Want to guess how many of those categories humans have already matched or exceeded using methods the Council considers primitive? How many? 37. She let that hang in the air. We've been part of the galactic community for 15 years. That's barely long enough for most council species to update their stellar charts. And we've already caught up to or surpassed you in 92% of your supposedly impossible achievements. A Zenthari official stepped forward, her neural implants glowing with agitation. That is an extraordinary claim. You have evidence. Mountains of it, Maya said. But let's start with something simple. She addressed the crowd now, her voice carrying across the exhibition hall. How many of you use quantum processors in your ship's navigation systems? Almost every hand, tentacle, and appendage went up. Cool. Those processors probably have an operational temperature requirement of near absolute zero, right? Super expensive cooling systems, constant maintenance, the whole 9 yards. Maya grinned. Humans run room temperature quantum computers. Have for about 8 years now. Our navigation systems use optical processors that operate at 300 Kelvin and outperform your cryogenic setups by 40%. She pulled up another file. The cooling systems alone cost most species about 2 million credits per ship. Our optical systems cost 8,000 credits and last 3 times as long. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The Zenthari official's implants flared brighter. That technology was not in your admission documentation to the council. Because we didn't develop it for trade, Maya said simply. We developed it because our early colony ships kept having cooling system failures and people were dying. Necessity and all that. She shrugged. Most of our best innovations come from someone asking, how do we fix this problem cheaply, rather than how do we do this perfectly? An ocean merchant pushed forward, their translator struggling to keep up with their rapid speech. If what you say is true, why has humanity not dominated galactic markets? Why are you still considered a minor player in council economics? Maya's expression went cold. Because 14 months ago, the council voted to restrict human trade rights. We're not allowed to sell advanced technology outside our own space without explicit council approval. Which, shockingly, never seems to get granted. She looked at the ocean directly. You should know. Your government submitted a request to purchase human medical technology 6 months ago. Specifically, our cancer treatment protocols. The council denied it. The ocean's membranous skin flushed dark purple. My daughter, she has stage 4 cellular degradation. Your protocols could save her. I know, Maya said quietly. I read the request file. I'm sorry. The exhibition hall had gone very quiet. Vorath watched as the implications spread through the crowd like ripples in still water. The humans weren't just good at making things. They were potentially revolutionary in a dozen different fields. And the council had deliberately suppressed that information. Why are you telling us this now? Vorath asked. Maya's smile returned, but it was a predator's expression now. Sharp and hungry. Because the Human Defense Coalition just withdrew our petition for council membership. As of 72 hours ago, we're no longer bound by council trade restrictions, technology sharing agreements, or diplomatic protocols. She spread her arms. Effective immediately, Earth and all human colonies are open for unrestricted trade negotiations with any species or government that wants to deal with us directly. The crowd exploded. Questions flew from every direction. The Zenthari official was already on her communicator, frantically relaying information to her superiors. The ocean merchant looked like he might cry with relief. And Vorath just stood there, staring at this human woman who'd walked into his exhibition and casually dismantled his entire understanding of galactic economics. You planned this, he said. This entire conversation was deliberate. Maya nodded. My orders were to attend the exhibition, identify a high-profile craftsman whose work represented council superiority claims, and demonstrate human equivalency in a public forum. She glanced at his display of quantum-forged blades. Sorry if that feels manipulative. But the council's been playing games with us for over a year. Time to change the rules. And the knife? Your uncle. Oh, that's all real, Maya said, her expression softening. Uncle Jake really does make Damascus steel in his garage. My dad really did carry this at New Geneva. She touched the leather bag. That part wasn't strategy. That was just me being proud of where I come from. Vorath considered this. 600 years of mastery, reduced to a talking point in a political maneuver. He should have been furious. His chromatic display should have been burning rage red. Instead, he felt curious. Lieutenant Chun, he said carefully. Would your uncle truly allow me to observe his process? Maya blinked, clearly not expecting that response. Yeah, probably. Jake loves showing off his forge. Fair warning though, he's going to expect you to help. He doesn't believe in spectator learning. Help, Vorath repeated. You mean, I would be permitted to work the metal myself? I mean, you'd start with something simple. Probably a railroad spike knife or something. Uncle Jake's not going to let you mess with his Damascus billets until he knows you can handle a hammer. She paused. Actually, you've got 4 arms. He's going to absolutely love experimenting with you. I bet he tries to figure out asymmetric forging techniques. The idea was absurd. He was a master craftsman, celebrated across dozens of worlds. The thought of traveling to Earth to be taught basic smithing by a human accountant who did this as a hobby should have been insulting. But when was the last time Vorath had actually learned something new? When had he last felt the thrill of discovery, rather than the satisfaction of perfection? I would like that, he said. Very much. Maya's smile transformed into something genuine and warm. Cool. I'll send him a message. He's going to lose his mind when I tell him a 600-year-old alien master craftsman wants to visit his garage. She extended her hand. Fair warning, Uncle Jake's going to ask about your metallurgy. He's going to want to know everything about quantum folding. And then he's going to figure out how to incorporate it into Damascus steel, because that's just how his brain works. Vorath clasped her hand with 2 of his, marveling at the warmth of human skin. I look forward to the collaboration. Around them, the exhibition hall had descended into controlled chaos. Diplomats were pulling aside human representatives for private conversations. Merchants were calculating potential trade agreements. The Zenthari official was having what looked like a very heated discussion with someone on the other end of her communicator. Maya watched it all with obvious satisfaction. You know what the really funny thing is? She said. The council thought restricting our trade would keep us contained. Make us dependent on them. She laughed. Instead, they just pissed us off and gave us time to prepare. Now we're walking in with 15 years of pent-up innovation and no regulatory framework holding us back. The council will not be pleased, Vorath observed. The council can file a formal complaint, Maya said cheerfully. Which we'll ignore, because we're not members anymore. She checked her datapad. I've got about 40 meetings scheduled over the next week. Everyone from mining consortiums to medical research groups. Turns out, when you offer technology that's cheaper, more efficient, and more reliable than the council standard, people get very interested very fast. A young human male jogged up to them, slightly out of breath. Lieutenant Chen? Ambassador Williams needs you for the Xian negotiations. They're asking about the medical tech. Tell him I'll be there in 5, Maya said. She turned back to Vorath. Duty calls. But seriously, message me if you want to visit Earth. Uncle Jake's place is in Montana, beautiful country. Good beer, better company, and you'll learn more about practical metallurgy in a weekend than most council masters learn in a century. She hoisted her bag onto her shoulder and started to walk away, then paused and looked back. Master Craftsman? For what it's worth, your work really is beautiful. The quantum folding, the molecular precision, all of it. That's not something humans can do yet. Her smile was genuine. But give us a couple years. We're pretty good at figuring things out. Then she was gone, swept up in the chaos of diplomatic negotiations and trade agreements and the complete reorganization of galactic economic structures. Vorath stood alone at his display, looking at his blades with new eyes. They were perfect. Mathematically precise. Each one identical to the last, folded at the quantum level to create edges that could slice through starship armor. And yet, Maya's Damascus knife, with its organic patterns and hand-hammered imperfections, had felt alive in his hands in a way his own work never quite achieved. Perhaps perfection was the wrong goal after all. 3 months later, Vorath found himself standing in a gravel driveway in Montana, staring at a metal building the humans apparently called a pole barn. The structure looked like it might collapse in a strong wind. Inside, he could hear the ring of hammer on anvil and someone singing badly to ancient human music. Maya met him at the door, grinning. He's been excited all week. Fair warning, he made a playlist of what he calls Forge Classics. It's going to be loud. Inside, Uncle Jake turned out to be exactly as advertised, silver-haired, heavily muscled for a human his age, wearing a shirt that read, "I turn coffee into knives," and safety goggles that had seen better days. His forge was a propane-powered contraption that looked like someone had welded together scrap metal with more enthusiasm than engineering skill. It was the most beautiful workshop Vorath had ever seen. "So you're the alien master craftsman," Jake said, extending a hand that was calloused and scarred and strong. "Maya says you do quantum folding. That's wild. I've been reading about it. Seems like it'd take all the fun out of the process, though.
The fun, Vorath repeated.
Jake gestured at his forge, his anvil, his rack of hammers in various sizes.
Yeah, man. The fun.
That moment when the steel's at perfect heat and you bring the hammer down just right and the metal moves exactly how you wanted. The surprise when you etch the blade and the pattern comes out even better than you imagined.
He grinned.
You can't tell me quantum computers give you that same rush. Vorath thought about his sterile workshop, his perfect tools, his mathematically predictable results.
No, he admitted. They do not.
Well then, Jake said, pulling a glowing bar of steel from the forge with tongs. Grab a hammer, my dude. Let's make something cool. And for the first time in 600 years, Master Craftsman Vorath picked up a simple tool and discovered what it meant to be a beginner again. The metal sang under his hammer blows.
Sparks flew.
Sweat poured down his carapace. And somewhere in the rhythm of heat and force and transformation, Vorath felt something he'd lost centuries ago, pure, uncomplicated joy. Maya watched from the doorway, sipping a beer and smiling. Behind her, Earth spun through space, home to 8 billion humans who were about to remind the galactic community of a very important lesson. Never underestimate a species that considers the impossible a weekend hobby. The Arcturus Trade Summit reconvened 6 months after Maya Chen's exhibition hall demonstration, and the galactic economic landscape had transformed beyond recognition. Human technology had flooded the market, not through government channels but through thousands of individual trade agreements with species desperate for cheaper, more efficient solutions. The ocean merchant's daughter received her cancer treatment. Human medical technology was now standard in 47 star systems. The cost of quantum computing had dropped by 80% across the galaxy. And somewhere in all of it, a blacksmith in Montana was collaborating with a 600-year-old alien master to create a new kind of blade that combined Damascus patterns with quantum folding techniques. They called it impossible steel. And it was beautiful. The council convened emergency sessions. They passed resolutions. They filed complaints. Humanity ignored them all and kept building, kept innovating, kept finding new ways to do complex things with simple tools and stubborn determination. Because that's what humans did best. They took the word impossible as a personal challenge. And then they invited everyone else to join them for beer and a weekend in the forge.
The hammer rang. The metal sang.
And across the galaxy, the old certainties crumbled like Damascus steel under acid etch, revealing something far more complex and beautiful beneath. Sometimes revolution doesn't arrive with weapons and war cries. Sometimes it shows up in a worn leather bag, carrying a knife that someone's uncle made on weekends, and says with a smile, "Want to see something cool?" The universe would never be quite the same. Subscribe and like to my channel for more sci-fi stories.